Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvinavati Tamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Good. Welcome back. We continue our study. We're in a section often called Vyadha Gita. It's a section sometimes excerpted from the Mahabharata, studied independently, in which the Vyadha gives a lecture to this kind of obnoxious Brahmana. Vyadha, as you remember, can either mean hunter or, in this case, butcher. And just to review what we've just seen, the Brahmana goes to this Vyadha to learn about Dharma. And he thinks he's going to see this really great, mighty warrior, hunter. And he discovers that the Vyadha is not a mighty warrior or hunter, but was a lowly butcher. And he's really put off by that. He says, how can you do this? How can you do this lowly work? And then the Vyadha, who happens to be extraordinarily wise, proceeds to give the Brahmana a lecture on Svadharma. And this is just to review what we saw in the last couple of classes. Svadharma is entirely situational. There is no simple way of defining what anyone's Svadharma is. Svadharma, personal responsibility. What your Svadharma is, what mine, what every individual person, it depends on thousands of factors. In the case of the Vyadha, 2 factors. One is he was born in a family of butchers. And of course, in ancient India, you don't get a choice over your profession. If you're born in a family of butchers, you become a butcher. There's another factor we'll see at the end of this whole segment, and that is he was cursed. We'll see that curse in several more classes. But that's just it. What is your Svadharma? You have to consider all the factors in your life. Look at Arjuna. It was his responsibility to kill people, to kill his own family members, right? That was the context of the Bhagavad Gita. But what an unusual set of circumstances led him to that situation. So given the unique circumstances Arjuna faced, it was actually his Svadharma not merely to fight, but to kill his own family members. Now, always has to be interpreted according to situation, and it's complicated. In the last class, I gave the counter example. The Vyadha is born in a family of butchers. So I gave the example in the last class. Remember? The example of a boy born in Palestine to a family that has been fighting with the Israelis for generations. And there are families who have done that. And this boy's father was killed in a terroristic act. His brother was a suicide bomber, something like that. So then we could say, what is this boy's Svadharma? The Vyadha was born in a family of butchers. This boy is born in a family of terrorists. There are children today born in families of terrorists. What is their Svadharma? You can't just say, oh, you're born in a family, and of course you'll be. Now, that is definitely the boy's samskara. That will be the boy's inclination based on the family situation. Absolutely. But we cannot conclude that it is his Svadharma. This is where it takes a great deal of inquiry to figure out what is Svadharma. It is so highly personal and individual, you can make no blanket statements whatsoever. And in that regard, we just saw, this is the last verse we saw in the last class. So the Vyadha, the butcher, tells the Brahmana, Swakarma tyajataha Brahman, O Brahmana, one who gives up his own, Swakarma, Svadharma, same meaning. One who gives up their own karma, their own responsibilities, adharmaha iti drishyate. We understand that to be adharmic. To give up your swadharma is adharmic, obviously. Swakarma nirataha yastu, but one who is dedicated, focused on fulfilling his responsibilities, saha dharmaha. That indeed is dharma, to fulfill your responsibilities, your swadharma, according to all these circumstances. So, very nicely how the Mahabharata deals with the complexity of life. Without doubt, the story of the Mahabharata is the most complex story in the world. I think so. I don't think there's another story more complicated. The plot, all of the characters, so complicated, a little bit like your life. Life is complicated. Life is so incredibly complicated, and any attempt to ignore the complexity of our lives will lead us to be very naive and short-sighted. We have to accept the complexity of our lives. We have to deal with the complexity of our lives. The only recourse we have is if it's too complex for us to figure out, seek some guidance, seek some advice from somebody that you consider to be a good guide, to be a good authority, but don't ignore the complexity. Okay, with this verse, this topic, the topic of Svadharma, comes to an end, and now we can move on to one more topic. And the topic is based on the fact that the Brahmana, seeing this Vyadha chopping up all the dead animals, is thinking, this is an act of himsa. You're killing animals and selling them for people to consume. This is himsa. And now the Vyadha is going to respond to that comment. What is himsa? And remember, we saw that statement prior in this chapter. Ahimsa paramo dharmaha. You've all heard that. It occurred earlier in this chapter. It occurs maybe in about 4, 5, 6 different places it occurs. That statement occurs in the Mahabharata. So one of those places is in this chapter. Ahimsa is the parama dharma, is the ultimate principle of dharma. That being so, how can we justify this Vyadha, this butcher, killing animals? And that he's going to explain in the final topic of this chapter. Krishim sadhvati manyante, Krishim sadhvati manya, tatra himsa para smrita, tatra himsa para, karshanto langalai pumso, karshanto langalai pumso, gnanti bhumishayan bahun, gnanti bhumishayan bahun. So someone might suggest that there are better professions than being a butcher. Like what? How about krishi? Krishi farming. So now the Vyadha is responding to the Brahmana's criticism about himsa. So the Vyadha says, Krishim sadhu iti manyante. Manyante, some people think that krishim, that farming, is sadhu, is good. Krishi farming is good, at least it's better than being a butcher, is the idea. Tatra, but now look at the Vyadha's, the butcher's observation. Tatra, with regard to farming, himsa paraha smrita. There is so much himsa associated with farming. What is the farming? What is the himsa associated with farming? Pumsaha, the people who are karshantaha, pulling or plowing the land, langalaihi, with plows. Those people, those farmers who are plowing the land using plows, what do those plows do? They dig up the land But what is in the land? Bhumi Shayan. There are plenty of little creatures who are Shayan, who are literally sleeping or dwelling in that bhumi, in that earth, bahun. There are so many creatures who are dwelling in that land, and gnanti, they're being killed. They're being killed by the act of farming. So it's a good argument. You can't deny the argument. So the butcher is being criticized for killing animals, and many people say that farming is a more ethical, a more dharmic form of livelihood. But the farmer is killing so many creatures living in the land. And he continues to develop this in the coming verses. He says, oh, this is interesting. He really expands this. This butcher, it's just a quick observation. When you see someone working in that kind of profession, you wouldn't normally assume a lot of wisdom. This Vyadha has such tremendous insight and genuine wisdom and understanding, and his observations in the next few verses are pretty striking. And wait till you see these arguments. Look at his next argument. He says, Dhanya bijani hanyahur, dhanya bijani hanya, vrihyadi nidvajottama, dvivyaji sarvanyetani jivanti, sarvanyetani, tatra kim pratibhati te, tatra kim. In the second line, Dvajottama, O best of Brahmanas, he addresses the Brahmana very politely. He says, consider vrihi adi. Vrihi means rice. What about rice? Do you eat rice? I think most people eat rice, at least occasionally. Some of you will eat rice every day. Well, look at the Vyadha's observation about the rice you eat every day. He says, those rice, yani ahuhu, wise people say that yani, that rice is dhanya bijani. They are seeds of grain. They're seeds. Seeds of grain. Now, what is the significance? A seed is potential life. You put that seed in the ground, it grows, right? It's potential life. Now you're thinking, come on. Think about this. Some people eat eggs. By the way, eggs are technically vegetarian. I can't eat them, but technically they're vegetarian. How about a fertilized egg? Fertilized egg is something else. The eggs you buy in the market are unfertilized. If there was such a thing as a fertilized egg, would you even consider eating it? How about fish eggs? By the way, fish eggs can cost hundreds of dollars an ounce when they're called caviar. Right? What is caviar? It's fish eggs. Would you eat fish eggs? Many people do. By the way, if you do, it's okay. It doesn't bother me. I won't eat them. But here's the point. A fertilized egg is potential life. What about a seed? It's potential life. You won't eat a fertilized egg. You won't eat a fish egg. But you eat rice. And look, this Vyadha is really insightful. He says, even rice is eating the seeds of plants, which is potential life. And he concludes, Sarvani, Etani, Jivani. All of them are living things. All of these, every little rice is a seed. Of course, I know what you buy at the market doesn't look like a seed. It's all but you've seen the unhusked rice. That's obviously, it's a seed, unhusked rice. You get it with the husk off, but with the husk on, it's so clearly a seed. If you took that husked seed and planted it in what ground, you get a rice plant. It is potential life. Sarvani, etani, all of these grains of rice, jivani, they are living beings. Tatra kim pratibhati te, he says to the Brahmana, doesn't it seem so to you? Pratibhati te kim, doesn't it seem so to you that all these grains of rice are also living things? We discussed in the last class that, remember the comment, it was actually Puja Swamiji's comment about vegetarianism in the Hindu tradition, and he commented that Hinduism is not a diet plan. And that's really important. Remember that other religions have dietary restrictions. Don't eat pork, don't eat this, don't eat that. The principle of not eating meat is not a matter of religious purity, it's a matter of ahimsa. It's not that meat is impure in any way. Not eating animals is an expression of ahimsa. But now we take this further. The Vyadha is pointing out even eating rice is himsa. We have to think about it. He thinks about it. We should also think about it. How about some other examples? Vegetarians drink milk, which is healthy for you. I don't deny it's healthy for you. And you say by drinking milk you're not killing an animal. Thank goodness. But tell me, do you think cows in commercial dairies suffer in the production of milk? Absolutely. A cow in a commercial dairy is going to suffer in the production of their milk. How about chickens in the production of eggs? Are going to suffer. So even though milk and eggs are technically vegetarian, animals are suffering. Isn't that ahimsa? How about other things? Well, this is a funny observation about myself. Maybe some 25 years ago, I grew up, by the way, eating McDonald's hamburgers. What can I say? But by the time I was a young man, I had become vegetarian. Then after about 5 years or so, a thought struck me. And the thought was this: I stopped eating cows years ago, so why am I still wearing them? Wearing them? Leather shoes? Any use of leather contributes to killing cows. So what is the difference between eating a cow and wearing part of a cow? It's more himsa. We may not think about it. Any use of leather? How about if you have a high-end car? What do you think your car is upholstered in? Could be. All right. How about some other examples? Shall we take this one more step? Do any of you use electricity? To take this to the logical extreme, every time you turn on your light switch, you're consuming electricity. Electricity that is produced in this part of the country, it's all produced through burning fossil fuels. Fossil fuels which pump carbon into the environment, and the accumulation of carbon in our environment is damaging the planet. Every time you turn your light switch on, you're damaging the planet. Is that ahimsa? It is. So what is the message of the Vyadha is that we should wake up and recognizing that eating animals is not the only form of himsa. Wearing animals is himsa. Using animal products like milk and eggs is himsa. Eating rice. According to, it's a valid argument. Eating rice is himsa. But what will we do? It's all, but the point he's making is to consider this is all himsa. Then what is our option? Can you stop eating rice? Well, he answers that in the next verse. He says, Sattvai sattvani jivanti, sattvai sattvani jiv, bahudha dvaja sattama, bahudha dvaja, pranino nyonya bhakshascha, pranino nyonya bhaksh, tatra kim pratibhati te, tatra kim. Oh, one more thing. Do you ever drive a car? Do you put gasoline in that car? And when you put gasoline in that car, what comes out the tailpipe? It's all himsa. Now, what can we do? So you can give up driving your car, give up using electricity, give up milk and eggs, give up rice. Not very realistic, is it? And he admits, he says, Sattvaihi sattvani jivanti. Sattvani, living things. Jivanti, live upon. Sattvaihi, upon other living things. Living things live upon living things. This is Ishvara's order. Could you live without eating living things, recognizing that plants are living things too, are they not? If it's alive, it's a jiva. Sattvaihi, sattvani, living beings, jivanti, live upon, sattvaihi, live upon living things. Without eating living things, we could not live. Bahuda, in many ways, in all different ways, living things live upon living things. This is Ishvara's order, Dvija Sattama, O best of Brahmanas. He addresses the Brahmana very politely. So in many ways includes hunting and butchery of animals. By the way, Buddhist monks living high up in the Himalayas, they eat yak meat. If they didn't eat yak meat, they couldn't survive. It's a matter of survival. If you're living up high in the Himalayas, I'll share with you a funny anecdote. I think I had put this to Puja Swamiji long ago. I said, Swamiji, what about these Buddhist monks? So what is his reply? He had a very clever reply. I asked him, what about these Buddhist monks? They're living up high in the Himalayas. They can't live on the plants that grow up there because not much plants except for potatoes, maybe hardly anything grows up there. So therefore, they have to eat yak meat. And they're monks. So Swamiji, what do you think about that? He said, I think they shouldn't live up there. If they came down to Rishikesh, then they could have normal vegetarian food. That was his thinking. But the point is that our bodies require certain things for their survival. Suppose there was a vegetarian with a protein deficient diet and something due to the person's metabolism. Suppose if they tried to eat like vegetable sources of protein, suppose it didn't work. Suppose a pious Hindu vegetarian was protein deficient in spite of eating milk products, in spite of eating tofu and all of this healthy stuff, healthy vegetable protein sources. Our pious Hindu vegetarian is protein deficient and sick. according to principles of Dharma, what should that pious vegetarian Hindu do? That's right. Eat meat. Why? Ahimsa. Ahimsa. If he's not eating meat and it's causing his or her body to be ill, that's himsa. Himsa to one's own body. So if there were such a person that was unable to be healthy through eating a vegetarian-only diet, to stay to a vegetarian diet would actually be a dharma for that person. To eat meat would be actually dharmic for that person. And he concludes here. The Vyadha concludes here. Praninaha anyonya bhakshaha. Praninaha, living beings, creatures, are anyonya bhaksha. I like that term. It means they eat one another. Living beings eat one another. This is actually a reference to a scientific principle you learned as a child and you forgot about it. The principle, you remember, you won't remember, but when you were probably about 10 years old, I bet somebody told you about the food chain. And you might remember or see a picture of little fish being eaten by bigger fish, which are eaten by bigger fish yet, which are eaten by bigger fish yet. This is the food chain. Is that natural or unnatural? It's natural. It's part of Ishvara's order. Well, are we not part of that food chain? We are part of that food chain. In fact, we're privileged, thank goodness, we're privileged to be at the top of that food chain. Otherwise, consider we lived in a different planet where human beings were in the middle of the food chain, which means there are other creatures out there who regularly eat human beings. In another universe, that's possible, right? If we were in the middle of the food chain, we're blessed to be at the top of the food chain. Unless you're living in a jungle where there are some tigers around, you might not be at the top. But with that rare exception, but he said so clearly at the top of this verse, life lives upon life. Tatra kim pratibhati te, he addresses a Brahmana, doesn't it seem so to you? Te, unto you, kim pratibhati, doesn't it seem so to you that life lives upon life? Creatures consume one another as part of the food chain. Is this not natural? Is this not part of Ishvara's cosmic order? Absolutely. So then, where do we place ourselves with regard to our diet, for example, and other aspects of our lifestyle, using electricity, using gasoline, eating rice? What do we do? And we've talked about this in many classes. Ahimsa means not no harm. Remember I said has 5 different meanings. One of the meanings of that negative particle, is minimum, least, little. The term ahimsa, properly understood, means least harm. We should live in such a way in which we cause the least harm. Now, what does that mean? It means, well, certainly, can you live without eating animals? For 99.99% of people, the answer, of course, is yes. If we can live without eating animals, let us not eat animals. Can you live without eating plants? You have no choice, so eat plants. Can you... least harm, in fact, very nice. This can easily be extended to a very ecologically enlightened position. To use the least resources. So if using electric power does some damage to the environment, what is the message of ahimsa? To do the least damage. If using gasoline causes harm to the environment, what is the message? Use least. Not use no. You can't live without using no electricity or no gasoline. So what a beautiful, simple message, all encompassed in that one word, ahimsa. Ahimsa means to live in such a way in which we cause the least harm to all living beings, and we can broaden it out, least harm to the planet. Therefore, ahimsa paramo dharmaha is a very powerful and timely statement, and that is we can all live in such a way that we cause the least harm. Now, to conclude, to further on this topic, he says, suppose we take that topic very seriously. Suppose you take that of ahimsa as no harm, and the Vyadha says, how is it possible to live a life in which you cause no harm, zero harm? Is it possible? Well, he examines that in the next verse. Chankramya mana jivanscha chankramya mana jivansh dharani samshratan bahun dharani samshratan padbhyam gnanti nara vipra padbhyam gnanti nara tatra kim pratibhati te tatra kim pratibhati. In the second line, dharani samshritan bahun. Dharani, ground. Dharani samshritan, creatures which live on the ground. Like what? Insects, and even small. How about microbes? Are microbes living things? Absolutely. So microbes and insects and worms and all these little things are dharani samshritan bahun. There are many of them living on the surface of the ground, and padbhyam, with their feet, this is a third line, padbhyam, with their feet, naraha gnanti, people kill all those little critters on the ground with their feet when chankramya manaha jivan. When those actually jivan is referring to those creatures. So when people walk with their feet upon the ground, they are constantly killing so many little things. What is the choice? Well, one option is to do what some Jaina Shramanas do. Jaina means of the Jain faith. Shramana is their word for monk. So what do Jain monks do? Many of you know. They carry this whisk. What is the purpose of that whisk? They sweep the ground before them before walking. They also wear, you've seen Jain monks wearing a mask. Why are they wearing a mask? That no little insect or critter should enter their mouth. How pious. How committed to not causing himsa. But here, if we could ask our Vyadha about it, he would say, do you think they might miss a couple of bugs as they're sweeping? And what about these microscopic ones that you can't even see? So even those Jain monks, as pious as they are, by the way, they also have to filter their water before drinking it. Of course, here in this country, it's not a big issue, but like a bad joke. You've heard this, right? Why should you be careful about drinking unfiltered water in India? It's non-veg. Therefore, these Jain monks have to filter their water also. What is the point? The point is, it's absolutely impossible to avoid some kind of harm to some kind of other creatures in life. It's no matter how hard you try. Tatra kim pratibhati te, he says one more time to the Brahmana, doesn't it seem so to you? That it's impossible. As hard as we try, it's impossible to avoid all harm. Now here comes some interesting analysis. This Vyadha is a great thinker, very wise. So he continues his analysis. He says, Ahimseti yaduktam hi, ahimseti yaduktam hi, purushar vismitai pura, purushar vismitai pura, kena himsanti jivan vai, kim jivan lokesmin dvijasattama, lokesmin dvijasattama. Ahimsa iti yaduktam. Because yaduktam, that which was said, what was said? Ahimsa iti. Iti means the rest of the quotation should come. Ahimsa paramo dharmaha. So he's making a reference to that quote. Ahimsa paramo dharmaha iti yaduktam. When people say that ahimsa is the ultimate principle of life, and with that absolute interpretation of ahimsa, ahimsa meaning no harm, not least harm, but with this exaggerated interpretation of no harm, he says, yaduktam, that may have been said by Pura long ago, that may have been said. What could have been said? That you should cause no harm, zero harm. Pura, long ago, yaduktam, that may have been said by whom? Purushaihi, by people. What kind of people? Vismitaihi, by very amazing people, by very extraordinary people, extraordinary saints who had such a commitment to ahimsa. Extraordinary saints, something we should know about the history of religion in ancient India. You do know that in the Vedas there are animal sacrifices prescribed. It's right there in the Yajurveda. It's not subject to debate. If you know a little bit of Sanskrit and you study the Yajurveda, it's absolutely clear in ancient Vedic times, even sacrifice of animals was permissible. It's not today. At least it's not widespread today. It's not common at all today. That definitely demonstrates a huge shift in mainstream Hinduism from ancient times meaning like 3,000-4,000 years ago, from those most ancient times to modern times, there's been a shift. Sacrificing animals may have been acceptable, not may have been, was acceptable 4,000 years ago. For the most part today it's not acceptable. What changed? Well, there was a time approximately 2,500 years ago. We can actually put a date on it. About 2,500 years ago, there was a shift in the religious culture in India. 2,500 years ago is the approximate date of two Vismita Purushas, the words from the verse. Vismita, extraordinary, Purusha, person. There were two extraordinary people who lived approximately 500 BCE, one of which was Gautama Buddha, the other of which is Mahavira. These two extraordinary saints, Buddha and Mahavira, Mahavira being the last of the Tirthankars, the great leaders in the Jain tradition. These two extraordinary saints lived about 500 years BCE. And they had very strong influence on the religious culture at that time. prior to their time, 2,500 years ago, there was more widespread animal sacrifice and eating of animals. Following their advent, animal sacrifice and eating of animals waned. Now, to put things in historical context, this gets very tricky. When we're trying to put dates on things, we have some good dates for Mahavira and Buddha. We don't have a good date for the Mahabharata war. We don't have a good date. If you ask me when did that war take place, I have no idea, and I don't even want to argue about it, about when it might have been or when it might not have been. One thing I do know, though, is about the date of this text, Mahabharata. I don't know about the date of the war. I do know something about the date of the text based on its language. Based on its language, we know that the date of this text is roughly 200 BCE. Notice that date. Mahavira and Buddha, 500 BCE. Mahabharata text, about 200 BCE, which means several hundred years after Mahavira and Buddha, which means subject to that influence away from animal sacrifice and meat eating. And we can see a reference to that here in Vyadha's observation. He says, Pura, long ago, hundreds of years ago, Purushaihi Vismataihi, by some amazing people, some extraordinary people like Buddha and Mahavira, Yaruktam, it was said. What was said? Ahimsa means no himsa. But that was said long ago by these extraordinary people. But he continues, Kena himsanti jivan. Now this is the Vyadha continues. These great people may have said, these extraordinary saints may have said, you should cause no harm whatsoever. They said that long ago. But on the other hand, who, na himsanti, who can, jivan vai, who, while living, na himsanti, can avoid causing harm. This is our whole discussion. These great saints like Buddha and Mahavira, they had some extraordinary capacity, perhaps. We don't even know. Can we be a little bit realistic about this? Did Buddha walk on the ground? Buddha walked on the ground. He laid on the ground. He died on the ground. So, can we assume then that Buddha must have caused some injury to these creatures? On the other hand, Buddha, Mahavira, and others of that time, they preached a very absolute doctrine of not causing any harm. And Vyadha here makes a reference, is that reasonable? Ke nahim santi jivan vai. Who can live? Who, while living, can avoid any harm whatsoever? So it's fine for these extraordinary people to put that emphasis, but he observes it's not practical. Loke asmin, in this world, in this life, it's not reasonable to take ahimsa as no harm. On the other hand, it is reasonable to take it as least harm. Dvaja sattama, O great Brahman. And this verse, by the way, has 3 lines. The last line of the verse, Bahu sanchintya hihavai, Bahu sanchintya nasti kaschidahim sakaha, nasti kaschid. He says, Bahu sanchintya iha. Iha, here in this life, Bahu sanchintya. He says, I've thought about this a lot. The Vyadha says, I've thought about this a lot. He thought about it so much, he concluded that even eating rice causes injury to living things. So, bahu sanchintya, the Vyadha says, thinking about this a lot, nasti kaschit ahimsakaha. I've come to a conclusion. What is the conclusion? Na kaschit. There is no one, asti. There is no one who is ahimsakaha, no one who causes zero harm. There are many who cause least harm. But he says it with regard to this absolute interpretation. He says, in my opinion, there is no one who can live causing no harm. And that brings us to the last verse of this section. Vaktum bahuvidha shakyam dharma dharmeshu karmasu dharma dharme swakarma nirato yohi swakarma nirato sayasha prapnuyan mahata sayasha prapnuyan. You like this. He says, Bahu vadhu vedam shakyam. Shakyam, it is possible. Vaktum, to say. It is possible to talk. Bahu vidham, talk at length. Talk in many, many different ways. It is possible to talk in many different ways. Karmasu, about karma. About which karmas are dharma and which karmas are adharma. He says it's possible to talk at length and with so many different arguments about which deeds are dharmic and which deeds are adharmic. So, is a good example. Is drinking milk dharmic or adharmic? You could argue that one quite a bit, couldn't you? How about eating eggs? How about eating rice? You can argue. As he did, he was making an argument that even eating rice is eating potential life. It's eating seeds, which are living things. So he says it's possible to argue in so many ways with regard to our actions being dharmic or adharmic. He says you can argue endlessly about that. What are people who like to argue endlessly about such philosophical topics? There's a nice American expression, armchair philosopher. Nice expression, armchair philosopher. What does that expression armchair mean? It means they just sit and talk. They don't do anything about it. They just talk and talk and talk and talk. You have this nice expression, what is it? Bak karna? That thing? Bak karta hai. That thing. You just go on prattling. So to go on prattling means to be engaged in useless discourse. And a lot of people get into useless discourse about is drink. And by the way, go on, interesting observation, go on the internet and you'll find Hindus arguing about whether drinking milk is dharmic or adharmic. And you'll find that they're engaged in passionate arguments. They're really heated debates about whether or not you could eat, whether or not you can drink milk if you're a pious Hindu committed to ahimsa. So what is the Vyadha's observation here? He says that it's possible to be engaged in this endless debate about what actions cause himsa, what actions don't cause himsa, dharma adharmeshu karmasu vaktum shakyam. It is possible to go on talking, bahuvidam, from so many points of view. You can have different arguments about what actions cause harm and what actions don't cause harm. But Yaha hi, in this third line, but one who swakarma nirataha, one who is committed to his swakarma. Swakarma, your own karma, is a synonym for Svadharma. Svadharma, swakarma, they have exactly the same meaning. One who is committed to actually carrying out their own responsibility, nirataha, commitment. One who's committed to their own dharma, saha yashaha prapnuyat. Mahat yashaha, great fame. Saha prapnuyat, that person would gain great fame. What is he saying? He's being sarcastic. He's saying armchair philosophers can go on arguing this stuff endlessly. Do they deserve any special recognition? In fact, in his opinion, they deserve ridicule because they're just sitting in their chairs arguing about this stuff. But he says, Mahat yashaha prapnuyat, the one who is really praiseworthy is one who is swakarma nirataha, one who is committed to doing the right thing, one who's committed to Svadharma. Not just talking about it. And this is, let's just a brief discussion. We have a few minutes here before the class is over. Let's talk about this a little bit, because it's a huge problem for many students of Vedanta and people engaged in a spiritual path, that they're engaged in a lot of philosophical debate, philosophical study of scriptures, great intellectual journeys they're engaged in, all of which is great and wonderful. It's also meaningless unless it is incorporated into their day-to-day lives. You all know this. How many times is it that that someone professes all these profound teachings of Vedanta, and yet they're as mean and ornery a person that you'll ever see? What is happening? And you know this story too well. For many people, this all becomes an I'm sorry to use harsh language, it can become an intellectual pastime, a hobby. Imagine making Vedantic teachings or Hindu spirituality, making it into an intellectual pastime, which is a fancy way for calling it a hobby. Not so praiseworthy, is it? If it's merely an intellectual engagement, if we're merely thinking about it, if we're merely debating it, what's the point? The teachings of the ancient rishis were meant to transform the way we think and live. And if that transformation is not taking place, we've the expression, we've missed the boat. What is the purpose of all of this? Is to change the way we think and behave. So the message of Vyadha is a very powerful one. Ahimsa is not a concept. It's a way of life. And a way of life means to live each day in such a way that we cause least harm to everyone. I'll end with the anecdote. Many years ago, I used to travel, before I came here, I used to travel, especially in summer, and I would go and conduct these religious camps for children and teens. I used to do this all over the place. So I was in one camp, and there was a teenager who was complaining about his father. Father was a very orthodox South Indian Hindu. Very, very rigid, very orthodox, all of this stuff. And vegetarianism, and you don't even talk about it because it's just assumed. And this teenager was complaining to me that his father, in spite of his piety, he would do puja every day and he would do reading of scriptures and Vedic chanting. He did all these religious practices each day. But his father was so mean, a very mean person. That happens sometimes. And he complained, and the teenager had a really valid argument. And he says, what is the purpose of all this religious piety if in spite of the puja, in spite of the scriptural study, in spite of the Vedic chanting, he's so mean. He says, every time my father talks to me, he just says mean things, hurtful things. And what can I have to support? What can I do? First of all, I can't talk to the father. I don't know the father, and I have no way of talking to him. But I need to be supportive of the teenager. And what I observed to the teenager is the irony. The irony of a pious father who never causes harm to animals with his mouth, but causes harm to his own family members with that same mouth. It's true, right? Because we use that mouth. You can use the mouth and avoid hurting animals by not eating them. But this pious Hindu was using his mouth, his tongue, his voice, his words to cause harm to his son. I told his son, in my opinion, it would be better for your father to eat animals and stop hurting you. I told him. That was my observation to the teenager. And I think Vyadha would agree. Better he should eat animals and stop hurting people with his words. This is the message of our Vyadha. All right, we've come to the end of this chapter. It's too late in the class to start the next chapter. The next chapter, by the way, we're going to get into an interesting discussion about what is the goal of religious and spiritual life. In many traditions, Hindu and non-Hindu, the goal is heaven. And what we're going to see is a debate. Is heaven really the ultimate goal, or is there another goal which transcends even heaven? And we'll discuss that in the next section. It's on our website, and we'll start that in our next class. Some quick announcements. Tomorrow we have our monthly advanced meditation. First Sunday of each month is an advanced meditation. Tomorrow at 6:15. So if you are a regular meditator and you've studied some Vedanta, please come and join us. Advanced meditation at 6:15. After class, we have a small outdoor project, weeding. We have some weeds to pull out. By the way, are weeds living things? Uh-oh. Anyway, if you want, you can stay. We can use maybe 8 or 10 of you to stay back and do some himsa. Pull some weeds. By the way, if you don't pull, look at this. If you don't pull weeds, there's also some vegetable plants here. If you don't pull the weeds, what will happen to the vegetables? The vegetables will get hurt. So it's the whole thing. What can we do? So anyway, those of you who can stay back, please, you can go meet out back and help with the weeding project. They have some lunch for you afterwards, so please stay and then join the others for lunch. The library will be open after class. We'll end with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityorma amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.